Hello everyone, welcome back to Inking Out Loud. Today's episode is number 37, and we begin our dive into The Fires of Heaven, Book 5 of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. More accurately, we're going to cover the first third of the book, which, as Drew mentioned last episode, covers the prologue and everything up through the end of chapter 16. I'm your host, as always, Rob Santos. I'm joined by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And today we're joined by a recurring special guest who we've missed since our episodes on Stover, our own sound engineer, Mr. Pat McCaffrey. Pat, welcome back, my dude.
Thank you. I never really left, though. I'm always lurking in the shadows.
And you were on World.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What? Was he? Oh, my God, he totally was. What the hell am I thinking? Sorry, Pat. Something rang a little familiar to me when I actually wrote down the words, your first episode back since Stover. I was like, that doesn't sound quite right, but I couldn't think of what it was. Oh, well. You forgive me, right? Don't you?
I do.
Plus, you also had a couple of brief cameos. You popped in for a real quick second, I think during the asshole discussion, weren't you?
That's true.
Yeah.
And
the debate about Lanfear or Rand using the Portal Stone.
Yeah, it was totally fucking Rand. Obviously. But Lanfear.
I've actually come around on that.
Lanfear.
After doing some more digging, I've come around and I believe it is Lanfear now.
Awesome.
Oh, well, thank you.
Sweet.
It's nice to be vindicated. But
anyway, going forward, I want to say,
to be back.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Real episode. I was saying it's even nicer to be back for a real episode, and especially one of my favorite books in the Wheel of Time. Oh, yeah. Why I wanted to be on this one in particular.
This is an awesome one that we're diving into. And I want to say that, since we're not featuring a special guest today who hasn't read the entire series, our temporary restriction on spoilers has, of course, been lifted, though we are keeping in mind that the only spoilers we're going to discuss still should deal directly with the subject at hand. So, now, without further ado, my man Drew is going to take it away with a quick recap of what we've read so far. Drew, blast us off, dude.
Yeah. Amusingly, even though we read a third of this book starts a little bit slower than The Shadow Rising did, and The Dragon Reborn, for that matter. We go back to the old trusty prologue where Robert Jordan catches us up on what's going on. We kick off with Elida, who's always just a joy to get in her head, right? And we see kind of the state of things in her version of the White Tower. And we see that Padan Fain has now arrived in Tarvalon, which is very, reassuring. Then we get our first Forsaken social, which is not sarcastically very enjoyable. And I always look forward to these scenes as the series goes on. Mm-hmm. But from there, we go into a great little sequence with Min and Swan and Lyanna. We find out they've been arrested for Logain burning down a barn, and they're being judged by Gareth Brine, and he sentences them to indentured servitude, essentially, and they eventually, with Logain's help, they break out and run away, and Brine decides, well, I'm gonna follow, and he does so. He takes his armsmen and chases after them. They pass through Lugard, where Swan discovers the location of the rebel Aes Sedai gathering through a classic scene at an inn in Lugard. And that's about where we end off with them. But then, meanwhile, Rand and Matt and Avienda and Moiraine and Egwene and Lan and all the rest are in Rhuidean after the events of the Shadow Rising. The Aiel are sort of finding their feet. We hear about this thing called the Bleakness, which is taking many of the Aiel, where they can't cope with the fact of their true history, and so they cast away their spears and abandon clan and sept, and and pretty much right away there we have some politicking, and that goes straight into a Darkhound attack, and Rand uses Balefire, and we discover just what Matt's medallion can do. And so they find out, basically the last thing that we got from them is that the Shido are on the move. They're heading over the Jangai Pass, and the rest of the clans who aren't allied with Rand are also heading that way, and so Rand and company are getting ready to leave. And then our last big plot line follows Nynaeve and Elaine and Tom and Julian as they're leaving Tarabon after all the unrest in Tanchico and taking care of the Domination Band, and they cross the border into Amadicia. They are accosted and nearly captured by a Yellow Aja eyes and ears named Ronde Makura, who has discovered a weed that can negate channeling. And they have a narrow escape there, and they continue on down the road, and they arrive at a town called Sienda, which is overrun by White Cloaks and has a menagerie, a traveling circus outside. So that's about where we are.
Yeah, lots happening with our characters and their respective narratives. Like we have everything happening with Rand, we have Egwene, we have Moiraine, everybody on the other side of the spine of the world, and of course on the other side of the world we have Elaine and Nynaeve and their flight from Tanchico and their confrontation with the Black Aja and Moghedien. So much happening to discuss. I kind of just want to dive straight into style right away. And sorry, Pat, go ahead, dude.
Before we do,
yeah, dude.
Who else thinks that fork root is actually marijuana? Because I do.
Never got that impression.
That caught me last time I was reading this book. The way fork root, think about that as it would be in a flower. The effects that Elaine... So I think it's her point of view that we get this from, right? The effects that she describes are not at all dissimilar to the effects of taking that particular drug. And it would be kind of a delicious joke that if that is what Robert Jordan intended with this real world thing has properties that negate the one power in a different age.
Well, my next question, my follow-up response would be, have you ever tried pot, Pat?
Of course I have. I live in Colorado.
Okay. Drew, what about yourself? You don't strike me as someone who's ever partaken.
I have never used marijuana in any form.
Okay, Pat, what kind of crazy stepped-on shit did somebody give you? Pot doesn't do that to people.
It doesn't make you not be able to channel, because we can't channel.
It made like if you take too much, if you eat too much or smoke way too much, it's too strong. Depending on the plant, it can make you very, very tired. Burn you out, string you out.
You're gonna get really woozy.
But it's a lazy tired. It's not like an inability to move your body tired.
That's just because they are channelers. It has an extra effect on them because they can touch the one power. It's mentioned that other people, like if you just have any old person drink fork root,
like a non-channeler,
nothing will happen.
Nothing will happen.
Make a tea out of it.
And before I get into a big point about Nynaeve I want to get into later, just to make sure I'm understanding fork root correctly, Drew, this is one of my questions for you, before we actually get there. Fork root affects different people, different channelers, depending on their strength in the one power? Am I remembering that correctly? Like those who are stronger in the one power are much more susceptible?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, because I was going to make a point about that later.
In general, channeling, it hits you. Differently than if you can't channel.
Like take an Adon, for example, it's not more effective over one channeler than it is over another.
Yeah.
But so back to Pat's point.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
About the potential for this being marijuana. I think maybe there might be some like inspiration that he took from it, but I do not think it is. And the biggest reason is because it tastes minty. Fork root tastes minty.
Well, Jordan has to insert a way for them to detect it in the future, though, right? He had to give it some sort of notable presence, right?
I feel like marijuana has a pretty distinct...
I suppose you could have gone for skunky. I suppose.
Yeah, but minty looks better on the page than skunk ass.
But I'm saying like mint is nothing like marijuana in like aroma or flavor.
Not even close.
So that is why I do not think it is marijuana. It's
called fork root, not fork flower.
Yeah.
But if they're making a tea out of it, to me that implies a leafy plant.
Right. Where the roots come in. It's fork root.
I don't know. Well, it's just you have to talk to a botanist about this kind of thing.
as far as
'Cause
plot
they have
goes,
all
I'm
kinds
as
of-
close as one gets to a botanist. At least, like,
But people come up with all kinds of crazy names.
I'm
for
a mad
things
scientist, and I haven't really discussed this on the podcast before, but I have been, I have lots of experience with marijuana. Being in Canada, being it legalized here, I was a licensed patient for years before it was legalized. So, as far as pot goes,
you've worked for a
yes,
marijuana manufacturing
yes, I
company,
did
yeah.
work for a few months for what I think at the time I almost said they were the largest pot producer in the world.
Wow.
Actually, I was on the joint rolling squad for 2 months. JTF1 represents Joint Task Force.
But yeah.
Task Force.
Anyway,
Very good.
I do think we should move on.
Yes.
I don't think there's a ton of style to discuss with this book that we haven't already covered, but there are
Right.
a couple of things I do want to point out. One of them is it is notable that we are back to prologues. But interestingly, this prologue is very short. It becomes a trademark of the Wheel
Is
of
it,
Time
though?
as the series goes on. It's very short. There are only 2 points of view in the prologue.
But it's like a 30-page prologue, isn't it? That's pretty long. Well, I mean, as far as most prologues go. Maybe not for the Wheel of Time. It's not very
The
long.
prologue in my book starts on page 13 and ends on page 37. So it is a 24-page prologue.
Oh, yeah, that's not very long as far as
And there are
Jordan
only
goes.
2 points of view. We have Elida in the tower, and then Ravin during the Forsaken
Yeah,
Social.
we have a Forsaken Social. Our first
And,
Forsaken Social, isn't it?
Yes.
Sweet.
I
love these.
But as you'll see with later prologues, things like the Winter's Heart prologue and Crossroads of Twilight and books later in the series, we get prologues like 80, 90, 100 plus pages, and we get like 10 different points of view, a dozen different points of view that catch us up on all of these disparate events. And even in The Shadow Rising, where we didn't have a prologue, but chapter 1 was structured more like a prologue, we had several different points of view over that chapter. We had we had Min, and we had like Dane Bornhold and the Two Rivers, and we had
Jaikum
Surath,
Karadin, didn't we?
and we had Surath out on Kantorin, and so we jumped around more in that non-prologue than we do in this return to the prologue format. And then, even though this prologue is very short, these early chapters are very long. Chapter 1 is like 40 pages. And that's the one that's starts off with like Swan and Min and Lyanna going before, Gareth Bryan in Core Springs. And in general, these chapters early in the book are long. We've covered, in my book, about 320 pages, and we did 16 chapters. So we're averaging 20 pages a chapter.
It's pretty big.
And in the second episode we're going to be doing for next week, we're going to be covering, again, about 324 pages, and it's 24 chapters. It is 50% longer.
Yeah.
Or 50% more chapters for the same page count. So as the narrative momentum increases in this book, the chapters we're going to see start getting a lot shorter. Where, we read 16 chapters over a third of this book. There are total something like 56 or 58 chapters in this book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I just found that really interesting how the early part of the Fires of Heaven is structured, and how it's paced with word count.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up the fact that, with a lot of our style points, a lot of them have been kind of talked over in the past, because I was struggling to come up with new style points to discuss in this episode. But since we're still on the prologue, I do want to talk about Jordan's choice of our point of view characters in that prologue, specifically with Elida. I want to talk about how perfect of a choice I thought it was to begin our prologue with a point of view from Elida, because if you remember, ever since the Eye of the World, she's been this kind of really vague threat waiting in the wings, until we got to the final third of the Shadow Rising, when she makes her move and she casts down Swan Sanche. That powerful and decisive move brought her from what I consider to be a third-tier threat immediately to the top-tier threat to Rand al'Thor. And starting this next book with a more intimate look at her maneuvering from her seat of power, I thought was appropriate. Of course, her takeover didn't go as smoothly as she'd hoped, so there's a lot of fallout for her to deal with, as we expected. But Elida do Avenry a Royhan brings like the White Tower several steps higher in our ever-increasing list of things that are a threat to Rand al'Thor. And I figured if this was like a chess game, opening with this prologue was the equivalent to Jordan just suddenly, and without expectation, moving his queen across the board. It's like, oh, whoa, okay, hang on. Something big might be on the way. We have to look out.
And then there's the double whammy of having Ravin right after, who is an even bigger threat. You know, you have your lawful evil threat, and you have your chaotic evil threat, if you want to look at it that way.
And it's more than that, too, because this is the first time we see the Forsaken openly working together.
Yeah.
And they address how easily Rand seems to be taking out others of the Forsaken when they're alone and when they're isolated, you know, and taking a selfish approach, and Lanfear is espousing teamwork, which is, as Ravin notes, rather novel idea for the Chosen. But I do want to go back to Elida in this scene, because Rob, you're absolutely right in what a great like macro level choice it was to give us an Elida point of view right away. But on a micro scene level, it was also very interesting how he constructed that, because Elida is our point of view character, but she doesn't say a word for like the first 10 pages. She just sits there and watches and reacts and fumes, and it gives us a great idea, an even better idea of just what Elida's like and what she's going to be like going forward in this new tower that she's built, for lack of a better word. We see what her relationship with Alviarin is becoming, and we see how the rulership of the tower is going, where there's this council that Elida assembled, and it has already lost control. You know, she's frustrated, and she doesn't understand why she's not being respected the way she believes she should be.
Yeah.
So it's like a kind of killing two birds with one stone authorial choice to make Elida the point of view character for that scene, and to construct the scene around her in the fashion that he did.
Yeah.
Because it's strange to start a book off with a point of view character who doesn't do anything. Like, for the first 10 pages, our point of view character doesn't do anything. She just sits there and watches other people making the decisions.
Yeah, if I were to describe it, I would say that was deft, yet masterful in its execution.
Sure.
Yeah, and moving on to the Forsaken social, I do want to specify, I consider like the Forsaken and the fact that they're working together, that's a second-tier threat on my arbitrary sort of system, like in the list of things that are a threat to Rand al'Thor. It's obviously more visceral, it's obviously more dangerous than, like, you know, the White Tower, but we can still get the sense that the Forsaken are planners. They have their fingers deep in the workings of the world. They're not really ones to charge the forefront. I would say the most dangerous things to Rand, of course, are the Madness, right? And the Shadow Spawn, who are trying to attack him. This kind of stuff.
Well, but those Shadow Spawn are,
I suppose they're on the orders of the Forsaken,
yeah.
aren't they? Yeah, Ravin might be a little closer to the forefront in terms of a threat to Rand al'Thor. Lanfear, I mean, obviously,
especially
a huge one. Maybe, actually, now that I think on it.
In this book, Ravin and Lanfear are the principal antagonists.
Yeah.
So, and Couladin, I suppose. But.
And, well, yeah, Couladin. That guy. Oh, my God. I can't wait till we get to rant about him in the future.
Yeah.
But more and more as like we continue this journey through the Wheel of Time episodes, harkens back to something you just mentioned previously, Drew. I am glad that you mentioned there are certain things that we're, you know, not going to be able to keep discussing unless we sound kind of, you know, redundant.
Yeah, beating a dead horse.
Right, beating that horse into the ground, if you will. His foreshadowing, though, I still want to, like, oh, sorry, not his foreshadowing. These are things that I had listed as things that we had already talked about. You know, we already talked about his foreshadowing. We've talked about what I consider his formulaic approach with metaphor when he's describing people's expressions. Right, these things that span the entire series. But I still want to mention that Jordan is utilizing the hell out of dramatic irony. And this is something I just brought up in the previous episodes. I didn't
yeah.
really mention this before the Shadow Rising. And this is mostly in Min and Swan's narrative as they're being chased by Gareth Bryn. This poor guy is, well, actually, it's Gareth Bryn, I would say. It's from his point of view that we see this most obviously. He's completely missing all of the messages that the pattern is sending to him. For example, he's preparing to leave Core Springs. He's thinking already. He's actually actively thinking about Maratomanis and Serenla, and I forget Liana's fake name, and Dallin, the actual, false dragon. When one of his men returns from New Bram with news that the Amerlin Swan Sanche has been deposed and apparently executed, as well as the false dragon Logain. Mm-hmm. Right when he was thinking about that, right? And then in chapter 12, an old pipe, one of his men starts telling a story about Bryn's encounter with the Amerlin over this some sort of border dispute with the Mirandians, which for some reason or another prompts Bryn to start thinking about the strength of the woman who is Swan Sanche. Like, he's just so close to the answer, but he's got no way of seeing what's in front of his nose. And I love that feeling that it evokes in the reader.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
And even in the chapter before that, when Swan herself goes and meets with Mistress Tharn, the Eyes and Ears, and she says, Duranda, right? Duranda Tharn, that's her name?
Yes.
She's like, oh, I saw the Amerlin one time myself. And like and like makes some comment about she's like a raging harridan or something like that, and Swan's just like,
Would that be dramatic irony though? Because Swan is aware of what. Oh no, but Mistress Tharn is not aware.
Yeah, Mistress Tharn is not aware.
At this point. That's right. I didn't even consider that one.
Yeah, she has no idea that she's talking to Swan Sanche about Swan Sanche.
Yeah.
And I will note this is something I'll touch on a little later about the inns in Lugard.
Okay.
But yeah, I do appreciate how Robert Jordan uses dramatic irony. He knows that he has a theme building here, right, with miscommunication. And that's, I think, a big part of why some readers get frustrated with these books, because we know the details. The characters don't. Mm-hmm. And to us, when we see the whole big picture, it seems like, oh, this would be such an easy thing to solve. But on the much smaller level that the characters themselves are dealing with, it's not the easiest thing in the world at this tech level to just like talk to somebody across the world. Yes, they develop, things like traveling as we go on to help with communication. But the other thing is, a lot of the time, they don't even know, like, they need to be asking questions. They don't know the questions to ask, put it that way. So even if they were communicating, they might not have the information required to communicate in the right way.
Yeah.
And that builds off of this underlying dramatic irony that he has developing over the course of the series.
And you can even take it a step further and say that, yeah, the premise of magic tricks, why they work on everybody, is because you naturally expect certain things in the course of real events. And you have no reason to suspect that something might be afoot.
Okay.
Like Gareth Bryn has no reason to suspect that this person who happened to be involved in this incident is actually Swan Sanche.
Well, he was just told in the same scene that she's been executed. So I think so. Jordan gave that character the excuse that we needed so that we wouldn't think Bryn's being too much of an idiot.
Well, but even if he hadn't just heard that, like, why would anybody ever expect the Amerlin seat to be part of, like, a barn arson in backcountry Andor?
In this case, I wouldn't say it's so much about expectation as it was the fact that Swan was just worried he would recognize her voice.
Yeah, I mean,
as far as we know, there was only one meeting between the two before this.
I mean, that's understandable from Swan's perspective, because that would be a disaster for her, but... Yeah. It's an irrational fear at the same time.
The most wanted woman alive. So yeah, it's kind of in character there.
And Swan does have plenty of irrational fears, so it's not exactly out of character for her.
True, very true. As far as the end of my style points that I wanted to discuss, I just have two metaphors that Jordan used. I think I'm going to start, pointing these out in the future. I mean, I have already, but a couple metaphors that he used in the first third of this book that I really enjoyed. First one being, I think it was one of the wise ones that said it. They said, Kuladin was a bull with a bee in his ear, ready to charge in any direction. I love that little metaphor. I thought that was pretty cool. And I think my favorite so far, perhaps in this series, I think was in chapter 2. I know it was near the beginning. It is when Egwene and Moiraine are confronting Rand, or at least talking to Rand in the presence of Jason Natale.
I would call it
confronting. What? Sorry?
I would call that confronting. Things got pretty heated.
It was more in the case of Moiraine, he was definitely confronting, I would say.
Yeah.
But there's one line that Jordan used, and he said, "The two women looked at Rand as if butter would not melt in their mouths." I love that metaphor. I thought it was perfect. So
that is good. I like that.
That's the end of my.
He always has had a way with words, like
he does, without a doubt.
Yeah. So, let's dive into character discussion here.
Yes, let's.
And I want to get this out of the way.
Okay.
So let's start with Egwene.
Oh. Now I see why you said get it out of the way.
Well, it's only uphill from here then.
Yes.
So
I would say so.
This is where I really start disliking Egwene.
Same.
And there's a key scene here, and this is one of the things that like really unsettles me the most about Egwene. And it is in chapter, I think, 15, What Can Be Learned in Dreams.
So late. Okay.
Yeah, chapter 15, What Can Be Learned in Dreams. So she has just met with Nynaeve, with Melaine watching over her.
Yeah, and I know where you're going with this.
Okay. They leave, and Nynaeve goes to the tower, and then Egwene shows up. And Nynaeve, the first thing she says, let me find the quote. She's kind of accusatory toward Egwene, where she says, "So the wise ones have finally decided to let you come and go as you please?"
Oh yeah.
Or is Melaine behind, and she gets cut off by Egwene? And for the rest of this conversation, Egwene doesn't let her finish a single sentence.
Yep.
Because Egwene realizes in this moment that Nynaeve is starting to realize just how much Egwene herself is breaking the rules and disobeying the wise ones.
Yes.
And Egwene starts going off about how Nynaeve is a fool for sneaking away into the world of dreams and doing things by herself. And Egwene, to prove a point, summons a rape nightmare on Nynaeve. She summons two fanged, rape demons who start tearing Nynaeve's clothes off and clawing her skin and pulling her hair. That is such an insane thing to do. And then, of course, because Egwene is Egwene, who shouldn't be off by herself and is being a huge hypocrite in this scene, she loses control of the rape demons.
Who could have seen that coming?
She loses control of them. At what point? They vanished when she wanted them to.
They didn't vanish when she wanted them to. They do more than Egwene wanted. But of course, in the moment, Egwene acts but
of course,
they're full on
Except for Nynaeve,
this description the other seized Nynaeve's chin in a horny, calloused hand and twisted her face toward him. His head bent toward her, mouth opening. Whether to kiss or bite, she did not know, but she would rather die than allow either. Thick fingernails dug into her cheeks. Coarse flesh, drooling mouths full of sharp, yellowed teeth. It's insane. This is an absolutely insane thing for a human being to do, much less to somebody they consider one of their best friends.
Right.
And it's all because Egwene doesn't want Nynaeve to follow along this logical train and realize you know, like, just how badly Egwene is betraying the Wise One's trust. And this gets followed up by another scene later in this book, where Nynaeve finally does put it together, and she's about to accuse Egwene and is saying she's going to tell the Wise Ones, and Egwene again assaults her and, like, stuffs her mouth full of the, like, sheep's tongue root. So Nynaeve, and to distract her, to get her off that train of thought. Like, these are the issues I have with Egwene. She's A, being a hypocrite in this scene, and B, going way violent, way overboard with C, somebody she considers or is given to us as one of her best friends, one of her closest confidants in the world.
Role model, even.
Like
certain
this
point.
this scene right here is insane to me. Okay. And these are the kind of things that I cannot stand about Egwene.
Compare something very similar that happens with Rand often throughout the series. Like, when Rand loses control of his power and he wants to show Egwene and Elaine, for instance, in The Shadow Rising, what does he do? Oh, he picks them up into the air and melts a bunch of shit. As opposed to...
And he immediately, he sees
cuts them
that
off
they're
from the
scared,
source.
and he immediately apologizes.
Screams at them.
And, you know, and he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. It's Egwene here acts like nothing's wrong. Oh, by the way, you go do this now. Okay. Like,
So, no, it is
Sorry,
infuriating. It's infuriating. You're right, Drew. And the fact that people will inevitably try and defend the indefensible when it comes to Egwene doing things like this makes it even more frustrating.
Okay. So, you've given me a lot to say, because listening to your rant there, Drew, I went into it, I liked how you started it. I was agreeing. Then I started to disagree a little bit. I started to disagree a little more. I agreed, really, again, briefly. But overall, I think you're being a little too harsh. And let me justify that.
She summoned a rape nightmare on her friend.
Let me justify that, okay?
How do you justify that?
I will. You'll see.
Let's find out.
I want to... Let me just dig this hole a little deeper, my friend. Egwene is still Egwene, and it does continue to bother me on the surface. I don't despise her yet, and I do have some complimentary things to say about her. To begin, she's really starting to hit her stride in her training with the Wise Ones. And despite her flouncing of their strict rules about the exploration of Teleronriad on her own, her learning about the world of dreams is accelerating hand in hand with her learning about herself. I will say that seeing her dress down Nynaeve when I was a teenager, maybe not now, but definitely when I was a teenager, scolding Nynaeve like a child felt awesome. Because, let's be real, Nynaeve deserves at least a little bit of it. The scolding in particular, that's all I'm talking about.
Not from Egwene, though.
Not from Egwene, but she needs to hear it from somebody. I will say
who
Egwene
has legitimate authority and legitimate
may have
call to dress Nynaeve down.
Yeah, I will say Egwene may have taken it a little too far.
A little.
What else is to be expected from a young woman who has finally learned to speak up for herself and confront old figures of authority, especially when she is in the right? Not with what she is doing. Her actions here are reprehensible. But Nynaeve needs to be taught a lesson about Teleronriad. She feels too safe. She feels too secure in there. Egwene legitimately does fear for Nynaeve's life or more. So I can see why she would like.
There are many other ways you can go about teaching her that lesson. That do not cross the line of common decency and then go way into the hinterlands of outright evil.
Sort of feels like something that the Wise Ones would do, though, to punish somebody in Teleronriad. Of course, they would have much more mastery over the world of dreams, and therefore would be able to stop it from going too far.
Let's compare when the Wise Ones think Egwene needs to learn a lesson about going off.
Holy sorry, go ahead.
When the Wise Ones see that Egwene is like disobeying them and going off by herself, and they decide to teach her a lesson, they have she has this like dream within a dream where she wakes up in her tent and Amis is sitting there, and Amis turns into a demon.
Yes. Oh yes. Okay.
Right. All she does is appear that way. She doesn't actually summon demons to attack Egwene. She just scares her to say, look, this is what you don't understand. These things are possible here. Egwene takes it 10 steps further and creates things that, A, aren't herself. Amice just changed her own appearance.
That's ignorance,
to scare Egwene.
That's not, like, maliciousness.
I would very much argue anybody who would even think about, like, summoning rape demons...
So, okay, so...
to teach somebody else a lesson, that is absolutely not just ignorance.
My response...
That's absolutely maliciousness.
To that would be, what then is the line that you draw? What's the difference between, like you said, Amice attacking Egwene in the World of Dreams, or not attacking her, but scaring almost literally the life out of her and making her think she's going to die? Or, take another example, Hopper lunging at Perrin's throat, and Perrin waking up and reaching for his throat to clamp in lifeblood, what he thinks like Hopper making Perrin think he's going to die, and
Hopper is a literal
Egwene
wild
making
animal.
Nynaeve think she's about to be raped.
Hopper is a wolf. He's a wild animal. That's not even remotely comparable. Like,
okay, Amice made Egwene think she was going to die.
Just because he's
lesson.
anthropomorphized and given, like,
Hopper made Perrin
this.
think he was going to die as a lesson.
Because Hopper is a wild
Egwene
animal.
makes
That's
Nynaeve
how wild
think
animals
she's going
communicate.
to be raped.
But no, Rob, it's a good...
Not
it's a
to
good...
downplay that at all in any way, but it's just, I can see that being the foolish decision of a naive teenager. I mean, you defended Fael when I was attacking Fael endlessly in the previous
write
episodes.
off that as simple naivete.
Well, I can't write off Fael's actions in The Dragon Reborn as being simple naivete. But you argued, her age does have a lot to do with it, right? I'll say the same thing.
Nothing Fael did in The Dragon Reborn is even remotely like
not even close.
Summoning rape
you're right.
demons.
You're absolutely
on,
right. I'm not going to claim that at all.
Like this one scene, and like I'm harping on this hard because I have strong feelings about this. Like,
sure.
Like sexual assault, in particular, that is one of the most horrific things you can do as a human being.
Yeah. And so is
and
murder.
And Egwene, the first thing she goes to when dealing with her best friends is sexual assault.
So would it have been better if these demons just like strung Nynaeve up by the hair and held a knife to her throat and made her think she was about to die? Would that have been different?
That's also assault. Like,
how is that different from what Amice did to Egwene?
Because Amice didn't do anything to her. She just changed her own appearance. She didn't attack
But Egwene could do nothing but shriek as the jaws clamped around her face. I mean, they didn't actually touch her, but she thought she was going to die. Horrifically.
She didn't physically do anything to Egwene. Nynaeve is going to wake up from this with claw marks on her face and bleeding marks on her chest. And
but
there is a
difference there,
major difference
is
there.
Egwene's ignorance more than it is maliciousness. She just couldn't control the dream well enough. She thought she could.
And that
against her
that
character.
only makes it worse because that makes her a hypocrite. Because the whole reason she did this was saying, Nynaeve, you need to be taught a lesson because you don't understand the dream well enough. When Egwene herself doesn't understand the dream well enough.
I fully agree with that. There are other lessons, and that was quite...
But no, Rob, it's a fair and good question that you raise when you say, okay, where's the line? There's two things that we can do to establish where that line is. The first we only kind of barely touched on, and that's the question of authority. Egwene doesn't actually have any legitimate authority to teach anyone anything.
Yes.
As far as the World of Dreams is concerned.
Agreed.
So she's not justified in doing anything with that viewpoint. But, let's smooth that aside for now. If you grant that she's allowed to do something, the line should be the place where it is possible for serious consequences to occur or not, like serious physical injury to occur or not. Like Amice is on one side of that line because she had control, and the authority, and stopped whatever her demonstration before it could do anything. But Egwene lacked the finesse to stop things getting out of hand, and she also put a situation in play that was just out of hand by its very nature.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fair line, and I think we can all fairly say that Egwene's on the wrong side of it.
Yeah.
In this one.
Yeah. I think you guys are interpreting that as maliciousness more than ignorance, though, and that's the only.
I'm not saying necessarily she was like, I want to see Nynaeve raped like that, but I think it says something about Egwene's character that the first thing she goes to is such an extreme form of violence. Like, and that is something we're going to see. We've seen in the past with Egwene, and we're going to see in the future.
She's trying to do what the Wise One did to her, except she goes way overboard with it.
Yeah, and
she goes a different direction with it, and way overboard because of her ignorance. Yeah,
and so going back to like why I feel so strongly about this scene, like I think as far as the non-evil people in these books, this is one of, if not the most reprehensible thing any of our main characters does in the series.
Agreed. It's in the top 3.
I would say we're going to have another very similar conversation in A Crown of Swords about another character who partakes in sexual assault. And that's another thing that like I feel very, very strongly about. You know, but like there are certain things that like really boil my blood in this series.
That's fair.
And this scene is one of them.
That's absolutely fair. And so, you know, now that I've spent 10, 12, 15 minutes defending Egwene, I can't believe I just did that. That'll never happen again, I promise, because there is still a list of things I don't like about Egwene that I want to get out of the way on this episode too. We're not done, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, dear
Buckle
God.
up, everybody. Okay, so she's like, as you mentioned before, Drew, hypocrisy. This is what I want to focus on. She is showing a lot more hypocrisy and willful ignorance than I remember reading at this point. For example, Chapter 5, Among the Wise Ones. There's a point when one of the Wise Ones says, after Aviendha was sent out on an errand, one of the Wise Ones says, "More steam, girl." And Egwene kind of zones out for a second, and then she jumps, realizing, oh, with Aviendha gone, they must mean me. So this logical line can only be followed that if Aviendha was still around, they definitely would have been talking to her, because an Aes Sedai of the Green Aja, after all, outranks a Proto-Wise One, right? Am I a little like
Obviously.
unjustified there?
Yeah.
Like, am I stretching a little bit? Because I realized
No,
writing
I
that
see
down
where
the
you're
second
going.
time,
I see where you're going.
it might be a bit of a stretch to assume that Egwene would assume Aviendha was the one they were talking to if she was present. But I don't know. That just kind of struck me
but
as
that logically follows.
not a red flag, but orange flag. You know?
Yeah.
But
I want to take a brief break from bashing Egwene to say that
okay.
there is one scene in this that I really appreciated, and I think this is like kind of the other side of the Egwene coin. And that is when she and Aviendha are punished and forced to run around the camp 50 times.
Oh, I was considering writing this down.
And this is Egwene's probably like greatest virtue, is that she is a hard worker.
Yes.
She is willing to suffer indignities in her pursuit of her goals. That she is not somebody who's going to shirk. She's not somebody who's going to step down from a challenge. And I think that is an admirable trait to have in a person. But like I said, it becomes more problematic when in combination with some of her other attributes, like her arrogance and her hypocrisy. But in that scene, I always really enjoyed that scene. It told, I think, in a very small span, it tells you a lot about Aviendha, and it tells you a lot about Egwene. Yeah. And it's a really touching, like, friendship moment where you can see them becoming closer because they are sharing in these hardships together.
Pat, anything positive to say about Egwene before I continue shitting on her?
When she deals with Rand,
yeah,
her heart is in the right place, but she goes about it in the most asinine, wrong, obviously misguided method that you could pick. Like you grew up with this person and you don't understand at this point that bitching at him is not going to work. In fact, it's going to make him more stubborn.
Yeah.
There's a certain but she does try and do the right thing. Like I said, her method is just ghastly.
Reprehensible.
It's arrogant in a way, her method.
Very
that she
arrogant.
thinks that dressing down Rand like he's a child is actually going to work.
There's a remarkable lack of self-awareness
Yes.
with Egwene.
Oh my god, yes.
Where you know, like, the way she treats other people, if they treated her that way, like, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you, like does not exist for Egwene.
Yeah.
I am so glad. I'm so glad
there's-
you brought up her lack of self-awareness.
There's do unto others before they do unto me.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my god. Okay, so my last point that I wanted to talk about Egwene is the point at which I got most frustrated with her. And Drew, as you just mentioned, this is the perfect jumping off point when you're discussing her lack of self-awareness and her staggering level of hypocrisy. I got really frustrated with Egwene around chapter 7, because up until this point in the book, we've now learned that she has intruded upon Ruark's dreams, where she felt belittled, Matt's dreams, which offended her, Kadir's dreams, which really, really offended her, Isandre's dreams, which terrified her, and tried to intrude on Rand's dreams, which baffled her. But there's this moment in chapter 7 when she thinks about Avienda's dream, namely the dream with the giant Rand on the giant Giadine, and she feels guilty because spying on a friend's dreams is not right. I just paused my audiobook and I went, wow, girl, that is just... I just don't even...
Right. It's
don't
nice
even
to
have
know
words.
that she doesn't view
Rand
as
or
a friend,
Matt as friends.
or Matt or
Yeah.
Ruark or
And
any
this
of
goes
the...
to my, like, I've had a long-standing point about Egwene over the course of the series, where she tends to only feel connection to people when they can help her in her current goals. And once she achieves them, she just moves on and abandons them. And it's things like this. Like, Rand, she grew up expecting to marry this guy. And he's like one of the people she is supposed to care about the most in the world, and she has no guilt over breaking in or trying to break into his dreams, but she has guilt over Avienda, who is currently involved in the same pursuit of a goal that she is.
Yeah. Agreed.
You know, like, it's things like that. Yeah, it does come down to a lack of self-awareness, and hypocrisy ultimately, and. Yeah.
Speaking of Rand and Avienda...
Yeah, I was just
two
going to say, now that we've
characters.
spent
Yeah.
what's probably a third of our episode today bitching about Egwene, we should probably move on to our...
Rand doesn't change that
characters.
much in this book, although he feels more relaxed and in control than he did in, this is the first time where it feels like he's starting to fit his shoes. But apart from that, I don't see any real big differences. But his relationship with Avienda is the real interesting part of this book for me on subsequent reads, because I didn't understand it at all when I was a young lad reading this for the first time. Like, wait, Rand and Avienda are falling in love with each other? That doesn't make any sense.
It didn't?
She stresses Rand out, and Rand makes her go insane. Like, what's going on here?
He pokes her, he prods her a little bit on occasion, yeah.
This is where we can be sure that there's a little bit of unreliable narration going on with not only Rand but Avienda. Neither of them think that they ought to fall in love with each other, but they end up going down that road anyway. Like, from Avienda's point of view, Rand does have a lot going for him. Like, he's obviously a very good-looking guy. He's commanding. He's the Kara Karn. But at the same time, he's a wetlander. And so she has this unconscious bias against him.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I couldn't. Look how ignorant this
The
wetlander
juxtaposition
savage
of those
is.
feelings must suck.
And that's why I think his little gaffes with Aiel culture irritate her so much. Because on the one, she thinks that they ought to matter to her much more than they end up actually mattering to her, as far as falling in love with him is concerned.
Yeah.
And Rand obviously is stuck on his I can't love nonsense, but Avienda has numerous appeals. I think she's the best of
I
Rand's harem.
High five.
For many reasons, like just briefly, physically for me, she's the perfect woman. And
Okay.
she's, you know, the other thing she has going for her is that she's not falling all over him like Elaine and Min. Like, oh, I'm so in love with you. No, she's like, no, I am going to fight this. And that's actually way more interesting and way more appealing for a man than someone, or like Barrelane, or Lanfear, or the horde of Kyrianan wenches that we see later on.
That Colavir sends at Rand in what, the Lord of Chaos?
No, that's the end of this book.
Oh, did they start at the end of this book?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a little closer to
what's her face? The girl who ends up Rand scares her and then she founds Chafail.
Yeah, exactly.
What's her?
Oh, Soralia. Not Soralia. Sulin.
No, not Sor. No. Sulin's a maiden of the spear.
Yeah.
It's the girl. No, it's
Yeah,
the
I know.
Kyrianan like
Oh,
minor
Chafail.
noblewoman.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I know
I thought you
exactly
meant
who you're
maidens.
talking about, but
Oh my gosh.
I forget her
Doesn't
name.
it begin with an E?
Anyla.
Possibly.
No, Anila's another.
No,
maiden of
Anyla
the
just
spear.
ran again. Shit.
This is gonna drive me nuts, so I'm looking it up. But
Okay. fair
Chafail?
Chafail, yeah, the like
I know.
Kyrianan maidens of the sword, like
Yeah.
yeah, they're founded by
Yeah, Colaver's handmaid.
Oh.
And after Colaver...
Solande. Solande.
Solande.
Yeah.
Got you.
Okay.
Thank
you. I
Now
needed to
we've
get
got
that off my chest.
Now
Yes.
that we've got that huge character out of the way. That really relevant character.
Discussing Elaine versus Avienda versus Min. I'm kind of closer to Rand's opinion that I really can't decide which one appeals to me the most, I suppose. I mean, Elaine is obviously Elaine. You know, she's nobly born. She's got the blonde, the hair, like, you know, she's got the bearing, she's got the beauty from Morgaze. Min just seems like somebody I could just sit down and just have fun with, have a beer with, you know. Min is somebody that you can hang out with. I just Min is awesome. I love her humor, but Avienda's got this whole exotic beauty thing going on, Drew, that you've talked about. She's
fiery,
tall.
you know. She's like this extroverted.
Yes.
You know, is going to be blunt with you. She's going to tell it like it is.
Yes.
Instead of bullshitting you around like Min and Elaine do all the time.
Min tells it how it is, I would say, for the most part.
Min is by far my least favorite of the three.
Oh, interesting.
Min,
not
like,
surprising, but interesting.
Min is the kind of girl who I did not get along with in high school.
Same.
And that was like
But I'm not the same guy I was in high school.
my like formative like points. Like I never had that like, oh, I wish I could get along with these people. It's like, no, I don't like you. Like, I did not like girls who acted like Min.
Well, I don't get along with any girls, but that's not their fault.
Whereas like Avienda, yeah, like Pat was saying, like she's a straight shooter. She's not gonna take any shit from you. Like if you're gonna have a successful relationship with Avienda, you need to
meet her halfway.
Yeah, you need to communicate. You need to be on the same page. Yeah. And as you said, yes, like the physical like description of Avienda
tall, athletic,
appeals to me a lot. Like tall athlete basically. Like I'm 6'4". Like, you know, my wife is 5'9". Avienda's like 5'9", 5'10".
Lauren's only 5'9". She looks taller than that.
Yeah, she's 5'9".
I guess I see her in heels when she's standing there.
And honestly, like this ties into it. If we were to do the old Watt Me fan casting, you know, on like the Facebook group years ago, where people were posting like selfies of themselves and then people would like cast them in the series. My wife Lauren totally would be a maiden of the spear. She's Irish descent, blonde hair, blue eyes, tall, athletic. Like,
yep. Can confirm.
Now, this might be like a wild tangent, also way TMI. But one of the appealing things about Avienda to me is that I would like to be the kind of man that she would want to be with. Unlike...
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
Okay.
Unlike the kind of man that I expect Elaine would want to be with.
So...
In particular, like a noble who's good at playing the game of houses...
but will buckle under her.
Will buckle under her, exactly.
When necessary.
Will be the bottom when she...
Based on her personality, you could say that her regard is valued higher than Elaine's or Min's.
And to a lesser extent,
It's harder to achieve, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To a lesser extent, that applies to Min as well, because at one point she does list the attributes that she thinks she ought to want in a man. Right? And it's like some, like, poet or like,
sophisticated, older, well-mannered gentleman.
Like, sensitive,
But
no, I see what you mean. There's, like, an aspirational element to, like if...
That's a part of
wanting to date a woman or be with a woman like Avienda means you should want to be a better man than you are.
Yeah,
like you should want to improve yourself,
and that's
because
with Elaine's
she has
nobility.
These high standards.
Yeah, Elaine's got high standards too. Well, no, Elaine does not have high standards. She's willing to go trudging through the rotten fish market in Falma.
In my book, the kind of man that Elaine would want is not
the kind of man I want to be.
Well, but also a self-made man. Like, that guy could just be born coincidentally being the perfect match for Elaine. Whereas for Avienda, you have to make yourself into that kind of person. You have to have the discipline and the intent.
Even during the Great Hunt, Elaine was talking to Egwene when she first met her in the White Tower about Rand al'Thor and how her mother probably wouldn't disapprove too much. I mean, nobility have married commoners in Andor before. Like, Elaine clearly doesn't have any biases about, her station and, who's available to her as a potential lifelong partner.
I would say that is very specific to Rand.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. And it just so happens that Rand is...
Yeah,
it's not a problem for her and Rand's relationship because he's the Dragon Reborn, and he's going to be a noble.
Speaking of Rand, who we're still on...
I was about to say, we went way off the deep end here. Let's reel it back in and move on to Rand.
Good. I wanted to continue and say that at this point in the Wheel of Time, we're starting to get a closer look at the sanity of Rand al'Thor. And I thought it was really cool, obviously, and downright chilling at times, because we're seeing Rand start to manifest and even respond to, in some cases, memories from the Age of Legends, as the voice of Lews Therin starts to make itself known inside of him. First off, hearing him call Moiraine little sister.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I was like straight up intimidated at that moment. I was like, Moiraine of all people, who we began with this as this figure of authority, and it just kind of slips out of him now. It's like in such a manner that both he and Moiraine are kind of temporarily taken aback by that comment. And I just thought it served as a great reminder of the difference in age and power between the two. And this time, when I say the two, I don't mean Moiraine and Rand, but Moiraine and Lews Therin.
Right.
No.
Yeah, it's interesting getting into Rand's head in the early parts of this book, because we see how he's coping with his new responsibilities and his sanity, and or lack thereof. But it nonetheless, I find myself pretty much on the same page as Rand in these early chapters. The only thing that makes me uneasy about how he handles things here is how he hides the Choydan Call. I can't fully say he's not making the right choice there by not telling Moiraine about them. That will change later in the book when Moiraine.
That's an interesting question I want to ask you later.
When Moiraine becomes much more willing to work with Rand, like we see after the Darkhound attack, and all that. And she ends up taking this, she swears, and she's more willing to meet Rand on a level as equals, as an advisor rather than a teacher or an instructor. And I mean that in the literal sense of she wants to instruct him in what to do. You, Rand al'Thor, must do this and this and this to achieve your destiny. She's recognizing now that, she can't do that. That doesn't work. And so she's willing to meet Rand and give him advice.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, Rand should have told her about the Choydan Call. I'm less certain he should have told her about Asmodean.
Sure.
Obviously, she figures it out eventually.
Yeah.
But like I'm not sure that would have made any kind of difference for the better for Rand had he told her about Asmodean and brought her into the confidence in that particular thing. But with the Choedan call specifically, I think Moiraine could have been a good kind of ear for Rand to sound off on his ultimate plans with those. Because after she like comes to that realization of, I need to recognize that what I think isn't necessarily the way things are going to go, that she would have been pretty open-minded with Rand about his thoughts on using the Choedan call for specific things later in the series. So that's really my only frustration with Rand in the early parts of this book.
Okay. And that's fair. I'm really glad you brought up Moiraine, because a lot of that's where I want to go next after we're done with Rand, because a lot of my discussion points with Rand and with Moiraine are in relation, are in context with their relationship with one another. And I want to say that I remember being satisfied as a kid when, Rand was finally in a position to order Moiraine around. But I now see their relationship pretty differently. Reading this with 27-year-old eyes rather than 13-year-old eyes, I'm getting more and more frustrated with Rand. I can see now that what I took for before as Moiraine's, her just desserts, that she's given information piecemeal from Rand and spoken to as if she's the annoying, bratty little sister. And then I stopped and I wrote down, Lews Therin might be affecting Rand's personality more than I thought. But I am starting to see Rand's treatment of her now as the arrogant, dickhead sort of 17-year-old, and I realize he's 19 or 20 at this point, but that's kind of what I was like I can see in myself when I was 17, who thinks he's got it all figured out. I mean, and even if that wasn't the case and she did deserve that treatment, Rand really missed the opportunity to be like the bigger person and just treat her with kindness and respect.
Yeah, I had a similar reaction.
Yeah? To
you. Like I got mostly in this scenario with Rand and Moiraine, because as the Shadow Rising and the Fires of Heaven progress, it becomes more and more obvious that she's trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, like where Drew said, where she swears that oath, that's the moment that his resistance to her should have stopped. Just stopped.
Yeah. And that's really when I get frustrated with him. I do think you have a fair point, Rob, and I'm not as frustrated with it as you are, but after she makes that overture to Rand, it frustrates
the overture. That's a good way to put it.
That he doesn't in turn reach out to her more than he does.
She extends that proverbial olive branch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the end of my discussion points for Rand. Does anybody else have anything more about Rand before we move on to Moiraine?
Not for this section.
No, yeah. Let's talk about Moiraine, and I want to kick this off.
Okay.
Using my comments on Moiraine in part 1 of The Shadow Rising as a sort of springboard.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Where I talked about how much of Moiraine's character arc is predicated on her conflict with knowledge or lack thereof, and how to interact and act upon her knowledge, and how early in The Shadow Rising, when Rand announces, I'm putting the sword back in the stone and I'm leaving, he's like, I'm off, I'm going to the Aiel Waste, and Moiraine has no idea how to react to it. She's baffled. She had this whole plan set up for him to go invade Ilion and take down Samael with Kalendor, and she's like, this is a perfect opportunity and all that. And then Rand just flies off the handle, and she's like, she doesn't have the knowledge anymore, because her interpretation of the prophecies, which was her kind of future knowledge touchstone at that point, is being proven incorrect. But now we see in these chapters, she once again has future knowledge. And she is altering her perspective, and she's altering her plans based on this new future knowledge that she acquired going through the rings in Rhuidean. doing the wise one, future deal. And she sees, these potential consequences. She knows I cannot try to manipulate Rand by sleeping with him, for instance. She's like, that will end in disaster.
Yeah. Surprised she considered it, honestly.
Yeah.
Took me by surprise.
And things like that. And so this is one of the points that I think shows Moiraine's strength of character. Is her willing to...
Strength of character.
Her willingness to humble herself. Because she... Like this is a thing, to go back to Egwene. If you put Egwene in Moiraine's shoes with this exact set of circumstances, I don't think Egwene ever would have done what Moiraine did here.
Not even close. Not even close.
Like Moiraine is so willing to... to humble herself and to...
prostrate herself before.
And to admit that she was approaching things the wrong way.
Yep, she's dynamic that way.
Her fundamental conviction that she's doing the right and necessary thing with her life's work, which she totally is, is what gives her the strength to do this kind of thing. Which seems weak only on the surface, but the more you analyze it, the more you realize, no. This takes a deeper kind of courage and a deeper kind of strength.
Right, and this is something that I didn't pick up on through my dozens and dozens of rereads of this before, but this time now, approaching it from, like, as you said, I'm 29 now, and I have a different perspective on life, and I've seen how life doesn't necessarily align with the way I planned things out.
Yep.
And I've had to adapt to things, and I've really appreciated Moiraine more in this read through. It was just reading Shadow Rising that I kind of had that epiphany of this Moiraine versus knowledge conflict that she has that's core to her character arc. And that's given me a much greater appreciation for how she changes as a character and how firm her foundation is as a person in the first place.
Yeah. I'm so glad.
That was nicely put.
I'm so glad that you put it in exactly that way, in exactly those words, particularly the words strength of character and the way she's willing to humble herself, because as you're going to see, I have a lot to agree with. So I'll start off with Moiraine by saying this is the book where my childhood crush on Moiraine turns into this more kind of mature respect and admiration for that woman. Because the journey that she's on has taken her so far, not just geographically speaking, but in terms of her relationship with those around her. So in the eye of the world, she was the mentor, the leader, the figure of authority and power who had all of the answers to be sheltered under and protected by. Okay?
Yep.
Obviously, she didn't have a lot to do with the Great Hunt. In The Dragon Reborn, she wasn't with Rand for a lot of the time, but we did get some brief moments where we got to see Moiraine and Rand arguing as equals for a change. The Shadow Rising saw her authority start to crack. She allows Rand to deal with the High Lords and the ruling of Tyr and to deal with the Aiel in his own way. But we did see some behind-the-scenes maneuvering to keep him safe on the path that she thinks he needs to take. But it wasn't until this book that we really begin to glimpse the depth of her devotion to her cause, as she finally takes on this kind of humbled manner. And she's literally at one point begging Rand to listen to her advice.
Yeah.
And we see this manifest in other ways too, as like her composure is tested. Her composure as an Aes Sedai is tested time and time again. Her arrival in time to save Mat from the Darkhounds, or heal him at least,
This might be a good time for a brief meditation on the differences between the blue Aja and the green Aja.
Absolutely, like Moiraine is absolutely is the patriarch of the what
matriarch?
I mean to say. Matriarch, perhaps, not the patriarch.
It can be summed up in... So we have an example of how Moiraine deals with the situation. If she'd been a green, she would be the kind of person who would try and sleep with Rand.
Absolutely.
Because to a green, Rand is more of a person. To Moiraine, the more important thing is Rand as the symbol, Rand as the dragon, not Rand al'Thor.
Yeah. Yeah. And like when she arrives in time to save Matt from the Dark, or like I said, heal Matt from the Darkhound's saliva, this was, as Jordan himself used in his wording during the scene, spectacular, I think was the word that he used. I mean, she's literally arriving on the scene in a full-out sprint. She's got her skirts hiked up for mobility. She's out of breath. And also, as a side note, and no, I'm not about to make a lecherous comment about Moiraine bearing her legs, okay?
Thank you.
But the maidens of this, that was fucking cool. The idea that Moiraine can dash through the camp like that, and the maidens can see her, and their first thought is, oh, she's running towards danger. Let's follow and dance the spears. So badass. Again.
Yep, just everyone on the same page.
Exactly. So this is something that I mentioned in the Shadow Rising. The maidens' respect for Moiraine, and you know, by extension, everybody else's respect for Moiraine speaks volumes about that strength of character. And I use those exact words, strength of character.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll have a lot more great things to say about Moiraine as this book continues.
Oh, hell yeah. We absolutely will.
Matt, nothing really dramatic or exciting, although there are some cool moments with Matt in the early parts of this book, like his dare or the bet. With that scene was very nice. His worry over Rand is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
The way it's framed from his point of view lends a certain color to the question.
Yeah. At this point in the book, I think Matt is still more fun than he is important.
Like when Rand's walking through Rhuidean and Matt calls out to him and he doesn't answer, and then Matt says "Loose Theron," and then he stops.
Yeah.
Chills.
Right.
Ominous.
You're just like, oof.
Very ominous. Yeah. I really enjoyed the scene. Like Matt's first scene, awesome. It was awesome. Yeah. It begins with him like half drunk, and he's betting the Aiel, and he's throwing the knives, and he's making all the increasingly ludicrous bets, and he finally meets Melindra.
Melindra in that scene.
Yeah, I was so my main note for Matt is congrats on the sex.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel like he lost his virginity earlier in the Stone of Tyr, when he was talking about the serving girls and then the other ladies that enjoy a kiss and a cuddle.
Think so.
You don't think he lost his virginity quite at that point? He just made out a lot and then went home with blue balls?
I am fairly certain, like call it 95% certain, Matt lost his virginity to Melindra.
Okay, and I can see why you'd think that. I'm like, actually, I think I would agree with that, at least mostly.
Because
I'm like 60% certain he lost
with
it with
other
Melindra.
like maids and like waitresses and things along the way, and he likes fooling around, but he doesn't sleep with all of them. Like he's.
But you're saying he didn't sleep with any of them until Melindra. I don't know.
Correct.
I don't quite know. Just his specific wording in The Dragon Reborn. These other serving girls and maids that enjoy a kiss and a cuddle
is not sleeping together.
I know, but that's also he's not going to say he enjoys
around.
Fucking railing this chick and banging the head. But he's not. Jordan's not going to say that. How would Matt say it?
What a kiss and a cuddle tells me is like he got the third base.
How would Matt say it then if he got laid?
I don't think he.
We don't really have any examples of that any time in the book.
I don't think he would have talked about it at all.
No, he wouldn't probably. But thing. Like I don't know.
By the fact that he said, "Oh yeah, kiss and a cuddle," that's great. Like that tells me he didn't sleep with them. That maybe he got the third base.
It's funny now that you mentioned.
He got a nice, a handy from that.
I don't know.
Wow.
That was your virginity when you got
We really jumped the shark on this episode, didn't we?
A nice old fashioned. But now that I'm thinking about it, the conjugal act is never actually like he never says any of the words that describe sex. He never says sex or coupling might be.
But my
betting.
point here is that when characters have sex,
more often than not.
Robert Jordan makes it very clear. Like
it's not
like having Matt.
Not a question.
You know, this Darkhound scene, for instance, where Matt and Melindra are sleeping naked in the same bed, like,
gee, I wonder what happened there.
Things like that. Whereas in the Stone of Tyr, we don't ever get the impression that Matt is, like, staying in the same room with a maid. It's like, oh, he's, like, you know, fooling around a little bit, and then they split off, you know. I never got that impression.
I would also argue that we see a lot of that same behavior later in the series with Aludra. He just kind of has a very, you know, has a very casual show up, make out, take off sort of relationship, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, you may have convinced me, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
But I want to move on to Perrin.
Cool.
Or the lack of Perrin.
And
Or the lack of such.
Yeah, I only have one comment about Perrin as well. Congrats on the sex.
That's
What, you think he also didn't lose his virginity until he got married?
Oh, Perrin, certainly.
Well, no, like, all I'm saying is that during this book, Perrin is on his honeymoon. Like,
Oh,
that's why
okay.
we don't get any
yeah,
Perrin
yeah.
points of view. Like,
Got you. Okay.
Thank God.
Congrats on the
Yeah.
copious amounts of
he's
sex, is what you mean to say.
he's in the post-wedding phase.
Yeah.
I'm not sure my
So-
spirit could survive seeing how pussy whipped he would be in the bedroom with Fael.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Well, who knows, though?
I will say I'm not convinced that he had sex with Fael before they
sharing
got
a room,
married,
dude.
but they did share a room in the Stone of Tyr, so I'm also not convinced that they didn't.
Yeah.
I think
open
that
to
one's left a
interpretation.
lot more nebulous. Like, we don't get any scenes of, like, Perrin and Fael naked in their room, the way we get scenes of Matt and Melindra, you know?
Sure.
Multiple scenes of Matt and Melindra.
Yep.
Or Rand and Avienda.
Or Rand and
Or
Avienda.
Rand and Elaine.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
Rand and...
Or Rand and Min.
Yep.
Anyway, but
Or Randy and Elaine later.
yeah, I do want to just bring that up, though, kind of tie back a character point to a style point. This is the first book in the series where all together one of our main characters does not appear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of 3 books in the series that this happens in. We get 1 book with no Matt, and we get 1 book with no Egwene. And other than that, every book features at least some of every major character.
Some. Being
So,
a very
but
loose
Wait,
word
refresh my memory. Which is the one with no Egwene?
Winter's Heart.
Yeah. Speaking of...
It's funny, 'cause she's on the
reasons
cover
why
of
it's
Winter's
my
Heart.
favorite.
No, she's not.
No, she's not. That's
That's
The
not
cover
Egwene?
is Perrin. The cover of Winter's Heart is Perrin.
What? I thought that was Egwene with the stole and the staff.
No.
And the big burly
no.
guy with an axe.
And the Manetherin banner.
So who-
And the Manethrin
Oh, I
banner.
didn't catch on
And
to
the guy
Manethrin
Eel.
there.
And the
Dude, I
beard
haven't
and the-
looked at the cover for Winter's Heart. Mine, that's one of my books that the cover was ripped off when I was like 17. I haven't replaced that one since.
Oh, yeah, no, the cover of that is definitely Perrin.
So
on
who's
his
the
hunt
who's
for
living on the
Fael.
horse with the staff and the shawl? Not maybe not
Either
the shawl.
Nora or Barrelane.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But yeah, anyway, but I think it is important for us to touch on this, that this is I think the 3rd biggest book in this series. I'd have to double check the word counts. A Memory of Light might be longer than Fires of Heaven, but I'm pretty sure Fires of Heaven is the 3rd longest. And it altogether does not have Perrin. Like, as much as there are valid complaints some people have about maybe a lack of restraint on Robert Jordan's part with, you know, certain plot lines and how spread out the series gets, this is a remarkable authorial decision to not have anything from one of your essentially 5 main characters.
Which I approve of, in essence.
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with it at all. I just think it's a really interesting writing choice to dig into, where you have a book that is probably 370, 360,000 words, and already shows, you know, some people would argue, some signs of bloat.
Yeah.
And yet the author was aware enough to say, listen, I don't have anything worth putting in for this one character, so I'm not even going to bother with him.
Oh, I totally think Jordan is self-aware about his numerous characters and all of that stuff. I simply think that he does it for the simple and totally sufficient reason that he enjoys writing that way.
Yeah.
And we presumably enjoy reading that way.
If he can
because
find
we're-
something that he enjoys doing that also happens to expand upon his world building, it's a nice pairing.
and maybe there is some legitimacy to the claims that he goes a little overboard, but it's not, like you're saying, it's not black and white. Like he clearly has restraint when he has nothing to go on with these characters. And he doesn't have a problem with leaving them out.
It's not that bad yet. Not in book
no,
5.
and I will say, like, when it, as we'll see later down the road, he was again very self-aware and publicly self-aware about what he considered his mistakes with Crossroads of Twilight. I mean, he talked openly about, like, I wish I wrote this book a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's fair. I think that's a good sign for the writer.
Yeah, we all do that as artists. We look back on the things that we did and we would have done them differently. That much is inevitable. They're a product of where we were at the time that they were created, which makes them special. Maybe it doesn't make them as good as they could be, but perfection is that elusive goal that if you try and chase it down, you're never going to get anywhere, and Jordan clearly understands this.
Yeah. So, are we done with characters then? Do we have any other characters we want to touch on?
Okay. So my last character point that I wanted to discuss is with Elaine. It's just one thing. I wanted to say that Elaine is starting to bother. Well, I don't want to say starting, but she's continuing to bother me a little bit. This time it's with her infatuation with Tom Maryland. Because hypocrisy aside, come on, could you imagine Elaine's reaction if Egwene passed news to Elaine that Rand was acting similarly with literally anyone? Jordan's still walking a kind of troubling line. I mean, Elaine has finally figured out who Tom Maryland is and remembers him more as like this parental figure than anything else. Yet Jordan chooses to play around with a more Freudian style regard that she has toward him, I guess is how I'll put it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely not a behavioral psychologist. I cannot speak with any authority on the sort of young woman challenging her mother's territory sort of interactions that we're seeing here. But I will say that with the raging hormones of a 13-year-old, younger Rob, was going, yeah, go Tom Maryland. But again, now that I'm 10 years older than Elaine, it just reads childish. And I really don't blame Tom for his sort of blatant, occasionally rude disregard. You know, Tom Maryland, everyone, what a stand-up guy.
When he bitch slaps her, that was
for talking about
the right thing to do.
More gays that way. That was
questions
of physical abuse aside, that was a
she's an Aes
his heart was in the right place.
Well, in training. Yes. You can't make the physical disparity argument.
How can Aes Sedai... Here's a question.
The so-called weaker person can use fucking magic.
How can Aes Sedai channel when they are that blasted? Like, are they actually just as... I imagine they're not as proficient as they are when they're sober.
Oh, yeah, your weaves are probably going to fall the hell apart.
Oh, man.
Yeah, probably. But unless you're just a drunk and you're just used to it.
Yeah, you're a functional alcoholic Aes Sedai. you can't make your weaves form unless you're hammered.
Could you imagine being able to get rid of the hangover, though, by just asking a friend and just, hey, heal me a little bit?
Yeah, that would do it.
So anything else you guys want to touch on about Elaine?
I do want to touch on that. Elaine has her faults as a character. I still, like, in general, I like her. Like, more than I dislike her. But this early part of the book, from the very first time I read The Fires of Heaven, bothered me. I don't know, like, you said it was, like, childish. I would just say, like, it felt very immature of her.
Yeah.
Right, okay. That's probably a better way to put it.
And I can't really... Like, I can't really justify why she does that. And like you said, I'm not a behavioral psychologist. Like, I'm not qualified to dig in to that kind of stuff. But to me, it seems, at least, like there should have been more of an emotional upheaval that would have led to this than her just finding out or remembering that Tom used to be like a father figure.
Okay, here's how about this? What if that earlier example that I just gave of Could you imagine if Elaine found out that Rand was acting that way with somebody else? Could that have been a properly catalytic event, do you think, to justify this?
With Elaine,
Maybe,
yeah.
Right?
What I think the problem here is, and this might be controversial, but I think this section was written badly. Because if we don't have enough information to go on, and if this is coming so out of the blue that we're scratching our heads, puzzling over, well, what the hell is going on and why is it going on?
It's just where's the justification?
We
That's
should
all I
have
want to know.
gotten. We should have gotten a few more details. He should have given us a few more clues.
I would say just outright, this is something that should get cut from the TV show.
Yeah.
I don't think.
That wouldn't bother me at all.
Like we don't need this. You know, this is a.
We probably won't
like
get
a
that in the
weird,
TV show, honestly.
random aside of like character analysis that
I can't see that being
Robert Jordan
on-screen.
wanted to
Yeah.
throw into his book, and I don't think it adds any value to the story. And I think this is part of why a lot of people will complain about Elaine and Nynaeve in the Fires of Heaven specifically. They tend to concentrate on Val and Luca's show,
Yeah.
but this is sort of the beginning of that whole weird mentality and dynamic between them.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. And I've heard some people say they want Val and Luca's show to be cut from the show as well, the TV show. Personally, I don't. I enjoy the hell out of those scenes.
You know what?
Yes.
Yeah, earlier I had been asked that question, what I would cut from the TV show. I think that would be a great answer. Val and Luca's whole menagerie. That stands up there as something you could cut in terms of like.
I mean,
just
you could, but I
narrative
hope they
structure.
don't.
No,
And
why in particular?
I
It's
think they're fun.
it's
I
just
get
funny.
a
Yeah,
crack
it's
out of
fun,
those scenes.
but we have
it's comedic
fucking
relief.
money to
Like,
spend.
Luca hitting
this is
on
gonna be
Nynaeve. is-
oh yeah, Nynaeve
Expensive
just,
ass
just
goat.
being like, no.
And like just Luca's ridiculousness.
Yeah,
We'll have a lot
he's
more
so
of that to
over
talk
the top.
about in the future.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'll deal with that later. But yeah, I think with that, I don't have any more character things to discuss.
I want to acknowledge there's a lot going on with Min and Swan, but I didn't write down anything to talk about regarding them.
No, I'm gonna have more to say with them once they reach Saladar.
I imagine I will
So.
too.
Quite.
Cool.
But yeah, so I want to move on to our lore segment.
Okay, cool.
Obviously, I don't have a ton for the first 16 chapters of the Fires of Heaven because there isn't a ton of like really cool lore stuff going on, but there are a few things. One is another common misconception I've seen on the forums and stuff, and this one really baffles me, is that going back to the Shadow Rising with Matt's die and live again answer from the Aelfin,
Yeah.
I see a lot of people say they thought he died during the Darkhound attack, and Rand's balefire here saved him.
Whoa, I thought you were about to say died hanging from the tree. I had no idea
Well, so
that
that
people
is
thought he
another
died.
common one.
Like, that's the most common one. That's why I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
you were going to say that. I
But
had no
I've also
idea that there was a
seen-
subset of fans that think he died from the Darkhound attack.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people like they'll be like, "Oh, the saliva on his arm killed him," and Rand had his balefire. I
But
was like,
Moiraine says if
"No, yeah,
if
like,
that had
he
happened
was
as much as he
clearly never
remembers,
dead.
then I would not have been able to save him. She specifically says that.
Yeah. We get the part that unhappened.
But people should be able to put
Yeah.
together that, judging by Moiraine's words,
Well,
that could be
people
a logical
should be able to
impossibility.
do a lot of
I
things.
just I'm baffled by this, and I just want to
Okay.
like
No,
fully
yeah.
clear the air because
Yeah.
like no, Matt never dies. Like he's there like at the door with the Darkhound slobbering on his arm when Rand balefires. Like he's not lying dead on the floor when Rand balefires the Darkhounds. Matt is still standing and alive, so he never dies.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Never dies
so
of Roy
so
Dion.
there's that one.
He does something else. But...
What we should do for lore next time is see if we can look at that list of Tirangrial and stuff that's taken from Roydion and see if we can either track down
How much of it we can actually
other
identify.
references to it and see if we can figure out what any of it actually does. If there's ever been mention of that
That
kind
would
of
be
thing.
interesting.
That would be super interesting.
I
just
do
worry that our
not
episodes
think
would
there's
just be like
much
2.5 hours long at that point.
on
We have
that,
lots
but
planned for the future.
but it would be something to maybe like I would dig out the companion and see if there's anything in there.
Yeah.
Ooh, I have a companion just 10 feet to my left.
But yeah, and then lore wise, that's pretty much it
Cool.
for me. Rob, do you have any questions on lore?
Yes, I have 2 questions for you, and then I just have a list of random miscellaneous impressions as I read through that I've been doing so far. But my questions for you, Drew, 2 of them. My first one is this is the second time in this book, first from Perrin's point of view and the second from Nynaeve's point of view, where we heard Brigitte mention the prescripts. So, from context, I assume it has something to do with how the dead heroes interact with those in the waking world who walk the dream. But do we have any more information than that? Like, what are these prescripts that she's talking about? Do we know?
No, I've never seen anything more concrete. I was always just under the impression that this was something the collected Heroes of the Horn came up with during their time in Tel'aran'rhiod, where they're like, all right, listen, we're in here for most of the time. We need to have some rules for how we handle it.
Or maybe they were given to the heroes.
But who would have given them?
The creator?
The creator doesn't.
I wouldn't consider that taking a hand.
Especially because
the prescripts could have been something to do with
horn,
the wheel of
the horn is never described as being a tool of the creator. It is the pattern. They're tied to the pattern. They're not tied to the creator. The pattern is an impersonal sort of like machine
vehicle. Yes.
Yeah, and so I think this is much more
that's
like,
cool. Like
the heroes themselves came up with rules for how they would act.
You got to admit that it's actually in line with the creator's policy of non-interventionalism, because that's exactly what the prescripts prohibit.
I mean, they may have modeled it after that, but I don't see the creator, because the creator doesn't specifically like choose the Heroes of the Horn.
Yeah.
So I don't see any circumstance in which the creator's just like, oh, the pattern picked all you guys. Well, I'm going to tell you what to do now.
But in essence, okay,
they say spun out by the wheel. Specifically, that's the verbatim they use. Spun out by the wheel. So does the wheel have some sort of consciousness? No, this is so fucking meta that we're going now. Holy
this is something, if we ever have Matt Hatch on as a guest, we can dig into.
He's super meta episode.
Yeah, he's pretty much the guy who has delved the deepest into the metaphysics of the Wheel of Time.
I'd love to do a super meta episode and have him on there.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
He's the founder of Theoryland.com, if that tells you anything. He knows his stuff when it comes to the metaphysics and like parallel worlds and perpendicular worlds and mirror worlds and all that. But I think the best answer I can give without jumping on Theoryland into the interview database or digging through the companion to see if there are more concrete answers there, is that they are just rules the heroes collectively agree upon.
By. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. My second question, my last one, it's about a particular dream that Egwene had. And I don't remember hearing it as like in this pass of the audiobook, but apparently Egwene, because I was looking up, chapter summaries beforehand, just to make sure I was still fully in the moment with this first third of the book. Apparently Egwene had a dream where she sees Rand, and I quote, sitting in a chair, and somehow he knew that the chair's owner would be murderously angry at having her chair taken, that the owner was a woman, was as much as she could pick out of that, and not a thing more. What the hell was that? This cannot be the Shan Chen Crystal Throne, because he never sat directly in it, nor did he assume any sort of leadership role over the Shan Chen ever. So,
isn't it obvious?
It's the Rose Throne. It's Caemlyn.
Uh-huh.
Oh!
That's
I just read it again, and okay, sorry. That should have made sense to me right away. Okay.
Yeah, even though Rand doesn't ever sit
here in front of me,
the throne, he symbolically rules Andor.
Yeah, and that's right. Elaine is infuriated that he
declares
he wants to give it to her instead of step back, right? Okay, no, that makes total sense. Right.
Especially because, like, so much of this book is geared toward an ultimate confrontation in Caemlyn.
Yeah.
Like, that's just another piece toward the ultimate puzzle of the Fires of Heaven.
Yeah. Should I just dive into my miscellaneous impressions then of things that I read?
Actually, we have a couple of listener questions.
Oh, do we?
I think we should discuss.
I didn't even know we had those.
Yeah. A couple of these are actually rather meta. So I think
right on.
have some fun here. We have Wolfen McCoy on Facebook asks,
Rings a
does
bell.
the pattern weave the same in each turn of the wheel, or does each spinning create more change and move more and more away from the vision of the creator? So
Very meta.
I think we have an easier answer to the first of those two questions, and that is I do not believe the pattern weaves the same in each turn of the wheel. You may have some of the same souls spun out, things like Ishamael's soul and the dragon's soul,
And the gambler.
and the gambler, and the heroes of the horn. You have these recurring themes, but as the Gathering Storm shows us, with Rand's kind of apotheosis on Dragonmount, humanity does have free will, and it is a choice on how people get to live their lives. The pattern may restrict choice in some ways, but it does not lock you into doing certain things. So I do not believe the pattern ever weaves the same in turnings of the wheel. Do you guys agree with me there?
I agree. I even think that it's somewhat backed up by Ishamael's claims. I think at one point we heard him say that he had, or at least claimed that he had fought Rand, 1,000 times, 1,000 times 1,000, each time wearing a different face, each time wearing a different name or whatever. I think that goes to show that though there are certain things that are not, there are certain things that are repeated. It's still unique every time.
Right.
There are neither beginnings nor endings, but it was a beginning, and it was
correct.
an ending.
Yeah. It's not the next beginning of the repetition of the same thing that's always happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, his second question, I think, is something we can dig into a little more.
Okay,
He
same
says, does each spinning of the wheel change more and more away from the vision of the creator?
Yes.
Now, I think this is begging the question a little bit here. He's assuming that the wheel weaves a specific vision of the creator. I don't think the creator ever had a vision like that. The creator is always demonstrated as a more apathetic deity. The creator created and then stepped away. And has only...
Definitely how it reads.
Has only ever paid attention when the existence of his creation is threatened directly. So we get him, like, for instance, talking to Rand at the end of Eye of the World and in A Memory of Light. And that's like the most the creator pays attention. So I don't think there's necessarily a vision of the creator in the first place.
I would quibble with your use of the phrase paying attention.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up.
I think he would always be watching, but still, because what's the alternative? It's like you make something and then you just walk away from it. Well, then what was the point of making it in the first place if you don't care about it? And obviously he does care about it because he's addressing Rand in this.
Yeah, perhaps I had a poor word choice there, but right. I don't think the creator specifically
I don't think he
made everything for this infinite cycle to occur where the same things happen every time and I want it to go this way. I think he created to see what would happen.
Right. So in that sense, the creator doesn't really have a vision that the pattern is conforming or not conforming to.
Yeah,
it's all what he wanted from the beginning anyway.
Mm-hmm. So that second question
open to interpretation, of course.
Certainly open to interpretation, but I think it is begging the question. It's assuming that the creator had a vision in the first place.
Read me that second half, that second part question again.
It says, does each spinning of the wheel change more and more away from the vision of the creator?
Here's something I want to bring up. This is something I had actually brought up, I think, in The Great Hunt Part 2. I did bring up the fact that I noticed with Rand's visions while he was traveling through the Portal Stone that each successive vision that we got a huge spiel on was perhaps slightly more and more removed from the reality that actually happened. For example, the first vision that he got in the Portal Stone, I think he missed with the kettle, or he didn't throw the hot kettle at the Trollocs' head, and it just ran him through. And then the second one was slightly different, where Moiraine didn't even come to the two rivers. And the third one was where not only did Moiraine not even arrive in the two rivers, but the third one was that he just left on his own accord, on his own journey. And at that point I said, do you think each successive vision in the Portal Stone could be perhaps more and more removed from this actual spinning of the wheel? So, I don't know. Right. Now, hearing this question, they're kind of... Right? Or am I, reaching here? Are they
I feel like you're kind of trying to tie the reality that has already occurred to some future vision of the creator, and I think that's also making an assumption there.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree.
I don't believe the creator had some ultimate plan for everybody and everything when the world was created. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there was a vision for these turnings of the wheel to move away from in the first place.
Sweet.
But so Wolfen McCoy actually has another pretty meta question here.
Oh yeah.
And he asks, who is the creator? Given that the Dark One gave us free will, should we truly want to be like either of them? He says humanity lives between extremes. And now, again, I'm not entirely certain that this is...
I don't even know how to begin answering this one.
I think he's, again, begging the question a little bit. I don't think necessarily the Dark One gave us free will. I don't think the Dark One gave humanity anything. I think
it's the interaction between the two that gives humanity free will.
Yeah, it's the fact that evil and good exist that gives humanity free will, that gives humanity choices. There was no, operative choice on the part of the Dark One to say, well, you created humanity, so I'm going to give them free will, so there, or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think the Dark One possesses that kind of power over the Creator's creation.
Exactly.
He is a force that's sort of in and out of it that can act on it, but he's not that profound or fundamental to the.
And the Dark One was sealed away from the pattern, outside the pattern at the moment of creation. So how could he have?
I'm really curious.
Acted upon creation.
I'm really curious to know where this idea that the Dark One gave humanity free will came from.
I guess maybe an interpretation of the end of A Memory of Light.
Yeah, I would say that.
But yeah.
Now, one thing to be one distinction that we can draw or should draw here between the creator and the Dark One. The creator is not like the Christian God, let's say. He does not act like that at all. However, the Dark One is very similar to Satan.
Yes.
So it's like, on the one half of the spectrum is something like what we are culturally familiar with, and the other is not.
And it's easy for a reader to then read these books and try to assign the attributes of the Christian God to the creator, because the Dark One is so similar to Lucifer.
Correct. That's exactly what I'm getting at. And we should be leery of that.
Yes, I very much agree there. And so Wolfen McCoy actually had a third question, and this will be our last question for the day. And I think this is a really interesting question, and we'll see how into this we get. He asks, should the gender-based magic be revisited if the Wheel of Time were written today? And he says there is a lot of room for conflict that was never explored.
What do you mean by revisit?
Interesting. So he wants to rewrite, or
he's
asking whether
he's
we
basically
should rewrite.
Discussing the kind of societal shift in thinking toward things like transgender and gender dysphoria, and how Robert Jordan's magic system draws very firm lines between male and female.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I can only speak to my opinion on this question, but my firm answer would be no, because society may have changed, but the facts of biology that Robert Jordan based the magic system on have not changed and
Yep.
cannot change, at least in a period that's so short as
and that's
20
where
years.
That's where I would have gone to, is that people like to discuss the one power as a gender-based thing, but it's not. It's genetically driven. We know for a fact in these books the ability to channel is determined by genetics and by soul. And souls are assigned sexes. Like the dragon's soul, for instance, the dragon will always be a man. And if the pattern needs a woman in a role like that, there is a different soul that will be spun out to take that,
Sure.
whatever
Okay.
whatever need. And so when a body, like a human being, is like genetically like male or female, I think that was more what Jordan was going for than this idea of like sexuality or
In a
Does
sense,
that make sense?
In a sense.
Does that make
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I'm right there with you. But it is sort of an interesting question. Like, I don't believe this, but let's just say there were a multitude of genders.
Mm-hmm.
That could have some interesting implications on the magic system of the Wheel of Time if that
Right.
were so.
Right.
However, that's
Well, and where I think ultimately it comes down to is what Robert Jordan was going for with his magic system here was,
Mutual beneficiality.
it was a conversation
exactly.
among different kinds of people, and I don't think we need to alter the magic to
Yeah, see, that's
improve that.
that's
Yeah,
what
we
I want to
don't need
focus
to.
on with my response to that question. Is it needed? I don't ever think it's needed. Of course, it's the author's right to write the magic system to work how they want it to work based on their own beliefs,
Right.
even if they want it to.
Right.
That said, if I were to nowadays conceive of a magic system that I wanted to write about that did depend so heavily on the divisions between male and female, in this climate in 2019, I would at least think of some brief answers to those questions because I know they're going to come. But at the time in which Robert Jordan wrote these novels, that wasn't really such a huge societal issue.
Well, right,
So
but he's
I don't-
asking if this
Does
were
it need
rewritten
to be?
today.
If it were written today,
Yeah.
if it were written, like, I don't know. If I were writing this today and this wasn't a thing and I had somehow conceived of this, I would probably just think of some brief answers to those questions. I wouldn't delve too deeply into it, but I would just, I would expect those questions to come and I would probably at least think of some responses, if not change how I'm going to do the magic system.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, like, if Robert Jordan wrote this today, I think he would have written it the same way.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think if people brought up things like, oh, well, what about people who are genetically hermaphroditic or, something like that, he would say, well, they don't have the gene to channel.
Yeah. Or I would throw something forth like it's a 50-50 chance. There you go. It's just how you got to deal with,
One last little comment about the hermaphroditic thing is, like, it would be kind of an interesting anomaly in the Wheel of
Ooh.
Time universe if you
I know
could
where you're going.
simultaneously channel Sayadine and Saidar.
To have a
also
mysterious
true.
If you
individual
were-
who can just do
And
both.
If
Oh
and
my
I
god,
will-
that would have been so
but-
fascinating to read, wouldn't it?
that
I
would
will
be kinda
also
cool. That would
say,
be kinda cool.
this is a post-utopian world. There is
Post-utopia.
a
I
zero
like that.
chance that in the Age of Legends they didn't experiment with genetics.
yeah.
And they could have done something that essentially removed the possibilities of, like, a genetic hermaphrodite or
I would
something
argue
like that.
Jordan probably made his stance very clear when he made Osengar
But-
and Arengar, seeing that that's how both of those souls were were male originally, and they were both drawing upon Saidine,
Yes.
despite
Yes.
the fact that one was reincarnated, at
Well,
least placed
yeah,
into a
and
female
that's
body.
why, as I said, like, it's genetic and tied to
It's
soul,
encoded in
and
your
so
soul, not so much in
Yeah.
the body. Yeah.
right.
The transmigration probably wouldn't have worked if they put Agon or Balthamel's soul into the body of a female who could have channeled.
Yeah.
Genetically.
Oh no, I think it's about the soul.
Genetic.
No, I think it
I
still
don't
would have
know.
worked.
No,
I don't know about that.
Because, well, yeah, let's say the person could have channeled the woman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, I don't think it would have worked. I think they needed a blank slate.
Or
To
could that have been a really neat justification for how it did work in your hypothetical scenario?
A theory
that would be so fucking cool.
I have a theory about this that we'll dig into later, and part of that theory is that I don't think it matters what the new body can do at that point. Or rather, no, excuse me. I think it does matter that the new body has that genetic ability to channel. That key is turned, so to speak. And then the soul determines whether it's side R or side E.
Well, I'll look forward to hearing the full explanation.
Yeah, we'll get to that like closer to, I think, the Path of Daggers or
Crown of Swords,
or a little later. But yeah, so those are all the listener questions we have for today. So before we move into the final draft, I want to just any last thoughts?
Yeah,
on the first third of Fires of Heaven.
I want to get reactions out of the way just for some simple things that I read here. I just want to point out that we haven't talked about what I consider to be the most ominous of Min's viewings at this point, and that is the aura of glory around Logain.
Ah, yeah.
That, when I was reading it, was a huge source of my interest. I was like, holy crap, when is this going to pan out? And if you had gone back and told 13 to, however old I was, when I was like 23 when this last book came out, how long it would take before that vision actually came true, it would have killed me.
Yeah.
Would have killed me.
Go ahead. I don't remember the first time reading through this. I don't remember if I even had an idea of what that glory might have been.
Well, I figured in book
after
6,
a certain point
and that I knew what it was.
I was like, oh, well, he's gonna end up leading the Black Tower.
Yes.
But at the time, in the Fires of Heaven, the Black Tower didn't exist. We didn't even know about the possibility of the Ashaman.
I made a hasty assumption in the future once I had finished books 6, 7, and 8, and 9, and I was like, okay, I think I know what it's going to be. Yeah. And it's involved, of course, but we didn't see it pan out until very, 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 very late in the series. So my second miscellaneous thought or reaction here is that this isn't the first time that we've seen Balefire. We haven't discussed really Balefire yet, or it's not even the second time we've seen Balefire.
Oh my gosh!
It's the first time.
I forgot my other lore point.
Yeah,
sorry. Go on.
It's the first time that we get some solid information about this hitherto mysterious weapon. Like, this book, after all, it's called The Fires of Heaven. So, we finally learn about its terrible power and its potential to cause massive repercussions throughout the pattern itself. That was pretty cool. So, go ahead with what you want to say.
Yeah, so, we see Rand facing off against some Darkhounds, right?
Yep.
He needs to use Balefire to kill them. The Darkhounds we saw in the Dragon Reborn, Perrin killed a Darkfriend with an arrow. Now, an arrow would not kill a Darkhound. There is a functional difference. There are different generations of Darkhounds. There is a new breed, essentially, that was created very recently that only Balefire can kill. And those are the Darkhounds sent after Rand. The old Wild Hunt was like the old school ones that you can kill. Obviously, they're tough to kill. They're fast. They're, super dangerous, but you can kill them with normal means. Yeah. Whereas these are only able to be killed with Balefire.
Very interesting. I had no idea about that.
I'm on Pat's boat. I had no idea about that.
Do we know who made them?
I was considering asking you when I saw how these Darkhounds kind of split and inkily ran across the floor and reformed, and I was like, I don't remember that happening in the later books. But sorry, Pat's question.
Oh, I just asked if we had any idea who created them.
Not as far as I know.
Okay. I would assume Agenor, but we don't know that because we just know
I
that
don't
he created
think Agenor because he got out of the boar. He got out of the prison and went straight to the Eye of the World.
Then again, the Darkhounds are mentioned specifically in the prophecies when Trollocs and Murdral, as far as I know, aren't really. But again and again, we get this kind of, I guess, concept or idea that when the Dark One is released, the Great Hunt rides again, or the Wild Hunt rides again.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I think it was in the Illianers, I think, that we've heard that from so far.
Yes.
Perhaps in the Dragon Reborn.
Some.
I want to say the Innkeeper.
Well, there's
the
bits
Badger?
in the
Naida.
there's actual quotes in the prophecies about
The
this
Dark Hounds
later
are
on
tied
in the
to
series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
But
So yeah,
but
that's my second. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think that takes us into the final draft. Yeah.
I still have a couple of impressions I wanted to get out of the way. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you said you only had a couple and you were done. Oh. Okay.
Yeah. In this case, a couple was a few. Sorry, I should have said that accurately. I want to talk about how wholesome Ruark is. The dreams that Egwene stumbled into.
Oh.
With Ruark, he sees Egwene who's a young, beautiful, exotic girl. She just has a daughter. And the way he still sees Amice as the young maiden of the spear that he fell in love with. I was just like, oh, my man, Ruark. He's perhaps my favorite Aielman at this point, with the possible exception of Gaul. But
I
Ruark
like
is
more
just...
than Gaul.
Oh, he's such an awesome guy. You answered my question about Forkroot earlier and about proportional effect on someone's ability to channel. You gave me the idea to ask this question. What would Moraine's reaction to Rand possessing the Choyden Kal be if he had told her?
I think she would have initially panicked, but given her change in mentality,
what would her advice be regarding
after
him if he had come clean?
I think she would have cautioned him greatly. She would have said don't ever use this until you have to. I do think she would have been on board with him planning on using them to attempt to cleanse Sidene.
You do?
I do.
Yeah, because she would have interpreted that as the right he needs to...
Yeah.
The wrong
I think initially she would have been really panicked at the idea, but she would have given it some thought. She would have paused and not reacted instantly under this new mindset she's operating on.
I'm thinking she would have panicked and then the next day approached him and said, okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Pat, any idea? Or any...
I agree with Drew.
Sweet. My very last point before we get into the final draft. Moiraine, again, has now hinted that she sees her end coming soon. At one point, I think she actually tells Rand, I won't be with you forever.
Yes.
And at another, near the very end of our first third for this book, Egwene breaks the news to her that Swan Sanche has been stilled. Elida has assumed the Amerlin seat and is now ordering for Moiraine's arrest. She actually comes across the written order for Moiraine's arrest. To which Moiraine responds suspiciously calmly, something along the lines of, there's no time for tears. And that they knew this and accepted this, and they're prepared for it. Mm-hmm. I just want to say how well Robert Jordan is foreshadowing everything that has to come with this character. Fucking phenomenal.
Certainly.
And that's everything I have.
All right, Pat, do you have any final thoughts then?
Only that I'm looking forward to talking about Asmodean a week from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's head into the final draft then. Rob, what are you drinking?
I today am drinking something I've never really, something honestly I didn't know existed. This is from Old Tomorrow Brewing. You could tell it's actually nice and strong by my slurred words here. I've had 2 of these over the course of this podcast. This is called Monty's Aged Ride Ale. And on the can, near the lip, it claims aged with oak wood infused with 100% Canadian rye whiskey. I hadn't realized before opening this that it was infused with Canadian rye whiskey. It definitely tastes like it. I noticed it as soon as I cracked it open. Before I had even sipped it, I smelled the rye in there.
So it's just described as an oak-aged ale? Did I miss
aged with oak wood infused with 100% Canadian rye whiskey.
What does it say before that?
Nothing. Monty's Aged Rye Ale. I'll read you the whole side right here.
Aged Rye Ale. Okay, so yeah, it's just an oak-aged ale. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome.
Hints of silky caramel, vanilla, and honey. Top shelf. That's not that. Vanilla and honey caramel. That
silky caramel is much better than crunchy caramel.
Probably like a brown ale of some sort that they threw. Oak chips in. That they
all it did. I mean, it's 6.2% alcohol by volume, and all it did was make me want to drink rye. I love my rye.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm drinking today. Monty's Aged Rye Ale from Old Tomorrow Brewing.
Nice. That's a great choice. Pat, what were you drinking?
I started out with Mike's Hard Lemonade, the black cherry variety, which is the best of the except for the blood orange one, which existed for a time, and then I believe it was discontinued, which is a crime because you can't have something as delicious as the blood orange and replace it with bullshit like the watermelon or whatever they did to replace it. Okay. And then for my second beer, Drew is going to explain what I had because we've been sharing this.
Yeah,
but in my opinion, it was delicious. It does exactly what a beer like that ought to do, in more ways than one.
Yeah, so I brought a 6-pack of these guys, so I gave Pat one. It is a Cabernet barrel aged Belgian wit beer. So it's like an unfiltered wheat aged in Cabernet wine barrels with Brettanomyces, which is a kind of a strain of, and it's very tart, very sour, a little funky from that Brettanomyces there. Really, really tasty. Pat is Pat's a big fan.
Doing the funk.
Yeah, it's from Snowbank Brewing Company in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is a little place. They kind of fly under the radar in Fort Collins with how many breweries we have here, but they do good stuff. And this beer is my ode to Perrin's absence in the first part of the Fires of Heaven here. And honestly, I wish this beer had come out like a week ago, so I could have done this for the end of the Shadow Rising, because it would have been perfect. It is called Wolf's Wedding.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
I assure you it is.
No, it's not. I don't want to look. I'm not looking at the fucking webcam. I'm not looking at it. I'm going to have to question my fucking concept of reality after this. Fuck you! No! Put that away. Don't show it to me. How?
Dude, one of these days, we're actually going to have a beer on here called The Path of Daggers. Like, it's...
Oh, no.
We're getting to that point.
So, you joke. I already have a beer sitting in my fridge for not a Wheel of Time book, but a future book we are going to do. This beer was specifically inspired by this book and is called the same thing as this book.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I had to trade. I had to make a trade to a lady in North Carolina for that beer. I am very excited when we get to that particular book.
Well, happy drinking to you all.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay,
so...
I just screen capped my fucking face right here, so y'all can see my...
my
reaction.
We're gonna tweet that out, yeah.
How the...
Yep. I'll tell you, I was worried. I was like, I have no idea what I'm gonna bring
You
today.
are seriously gaslighting me here. Like, I don't trust you anymore. I don't understand how you continue to find brews that have names that relate to the subject material this closely. I just don't... They can't... Jog on.
Well, it's a challenge, and I'm enjoying the challenge. So, I'm gonna keep it up as long as I can.
Wow.
I have brought a thematically appropriate beer every single episode since episode 2. I did not have one for episode 1. But from 2 to 37, I've brought in a thematically appropriate beer.
Jesus.
So, that said...
That's got to be a Guinness Book of World Record thing.
A very niche record.
Very, very niche.
That said, this has been episode 37 of the Inking Out Loud podcast. Next up, we will be continuing on with the Fires of Heaven. We will cover through the end of chapter 40, which will basically be the second third of the book. We'll be doing 3 episodes for this. And, if you're enjoying our content, if you appreciate what we're doing, and especially if, check out these awesome thumbnails that our artist is making. All of our Patreon support is going straight toward Danny, our artist, and Pat right here, who's doing hours and hours of work every week on sound engineering and making sure our episodes are ready to go up. So please consider supporting us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/inkingoutloud.
There's so much more you have to get into. extra stuff we have planned for what's coming out. And I also want to take a second to say that looking at the timestamp and what I'm recording right now in Audacity, this may be our longest episode yet.
Oh,
we are so close to the Great Hunt Part 1. We are literally within a minute. And my having stopped to take the time to say this may have actually made it longer. So that's why I wanted to stop and do it. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how this turns out.
Maybe.
But that said, I am your host, Drew McCaffrey. With me is my co-host, Rob Santos.
Yo.
And our special guest and sound engineer, Patrick McCaffrey.
See you guys on the other side of the Dragon Wall.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.